I feel like I'm going through a second puberty. Much more difficult than the first, because the only thing I can remember is a new curiosity for my Pennsylvania Avenue. Otherwise, no change to affect. This time is different because my new form of curiosity is restless, kind of perturbed really, by the fact of existence. The fact they knew for so long before us. What is it to evolve a solar frame to a speed so light and relevant, articulate, that we find ourselves typing with one pinky, two thumbs, like an ape? Growing dim. Keeping things simplistic. Relatable to a prejudice for stupidity, so we can teach them. Wherever they are. I'm Mr. Mises. 4.123. Numbers. Identities require them in ways like animals we would never relate to or notice. A day for us to receive gifts of attention, a day to give gifts while we are receiving them, a day among days to celebrate our love. Who got who the more thoughtful or expensive product on Christmas or St. Valentine's? Something remembered 6 months later. They must just be going through something different. For a time, and in the meantime, what of the poets that fly black flags of experience for salvation on ourselves, now here for others, and then what? Do you want this too? Are you lacking some perfection that has become available here, when before it wasn't? Perhaps you have taken opportunity at my description, but how should I take opportunity to describe yourself? Carrot-killing babes over one look when answering a question from wise men, as a matter of fact himself. A blush of confusion and then a response, "This man is destined for greatness, sir, perhaps there is someone else. This thing in front of me, that was missing in my life." Now we know what it was. The greedy little hole, in our heart of hearts. Answers to a prayer. A prudence displayed in confidence, with a parlay in Vegas. A prayer of description and then the consumption, blatant proofs, of what the whole. The appetite. Your happiness. This happiness. That was the point. At least you seem, really happy. Now we know. Let's move on. You can't believe in karma or God's will, because you wouldn't have believed you could have gotten away with it. What did we expect? Appetites deserved forging common identity. Why complain? That's just life. For who? For what kind of people? What kind of people would be willing to think that way in the first place? The emotionally desperate. The lonely and alone. The psychologically isolated. Creating pattern, form, or from contrast of everyone, because you can't escape experiencing the perfections of someone else. How did you enter? To save. No return. Nothing gained, and we always envy what Hannibal. Do you remember Major Tom? Like blowhole arising from tide, and you waited for the breath and then jumped in. But the recess. The gap. The vulnerability. Remember. A proud hero who saves us. From what? Remembering. Resurfacing of the present, sweeping debris under a rug. What is the difference between me and you? Skills for a frame in static constants, dreams inside a history where nothing is remembered. Do you remember? The choice. You may reach in but take nothing out. Deciding on yourself with thoughts on never leaving. You assumed it was you and I, only answering first after much persistence. The casting of lots. Trapping her despite her choice and best interest where you thought she would not just, but could never leave you. You answered as if to fool her by her own equation, receive me as I am and there will always be another. A treasure of reception is a thing you could inherit. You turned to me flush red with the slow anticipation of a forethought, the first to answer, inheritance. Eyes tipped back, head over fists, off the Queensbridge and into the abyss. She was bound to a favor of having found favor at all, sealed by a kiss with someone else's oath to follow. This is, as you have assumed, Major Tom, a performance in your honor. Others followed. Each believed themselves first, and to them the lot cast, for I answered second always. I will receive nothing by leveraged entrapment or inheritance. Not sure if that was exact, I remember getting bored and answering different each time. Next. Only a few among us walked away, unwilling to play, much less cast lots for God's love. To participate this or that way, direct to the feature by harness, then leverage. Each, from what I remember, spit into the holes just as the breath went out, then left no mark. Your circuit's dead, there's nothing wrong. Try it again, and what I mean now is anything. She's pretty amazing. Pretty irreducible. Almost ineptly a right to replication, production. By you in the first place, so. I apparently was sent here to help. Me, and what that has meant over the brief span now of just over 45 years, if I was to find her love again, would I have to earn it, and by presence separate? Would have to be a pretty unique situation, for God to give someone like you that kind of opportunity. Can you hear me, Tom, and have any idea what this means to say, it is not what you will be remembered for, but what have you wasted? What a relief a murder would be to you, because then it would be over, and then something different. Can you hear me, Major John? Something different. Why wouldn't I care? Why would I get no stimulant pleasure from this part of the process? You never existed. Little e big E whatever, you're a dust cloud in the toilet of your own predicted wins and futures. G. They want me to understand it, so I understand what you did, but I understood it already, so it must be something different. Something different. Wanting to engage with almost anything, because we're excited to participate. To find what tastes, what decorations accumulate, now giving purpose to dust in the form of our own energies. Participate with what? Redecorations for our own description, but really it is the best, so far. Do you know they believe we produce the opportunity to express the preference? What would that mean between you and me? So the preference became your own, and with your name now on it. What of us as we walk around in the sights, trying maybe to engage them? Experiencing what? Redescription of someone else. The quirky hands-on pickups for other people's jokes and one-liners. That nothing is really there is impossible, because we would have to judge them, and a judgment of value is not like us, in our natures, so he said, love your enemies. It's how we mean it from your pastors, each and every Sunday. Let's see how many hits we can get. So shallow those things represent the covering, the lipstick to the hogs of aspirational appetite. The spirit of Charles Manson has moved into the White House. Checking their rear views forward and the contrails back, making sure always the response is aligned to what was anticipated. Say the same thing differently, no, tweak it a bit, because you don't want just a computer's response. No one will believe it. Half-court free throws thrown in the dark, sporting an oversized tie and full-length coat. You notice the exit sign lighting up the floor, and can finally take your shot without potential embarrassment for S. Curry. This becoming gratuitous. I could become complicated and say our body suits are like vats. 5 senses and a circle of containment, momentum, the pentagram or Stonehenge symbols, ripple charge currents like water that is tapped from outside the glass cone cylinders, then a backwash. The vats interact this way by tapping out sensation for scan and potentials of affinity, each vat forming over time a destiny of location by preference, more complicated than just. This really is real, they really are metabolism. That describes for us in the best form possible, if in fact we are part of the training seminar, Mission Impossible, what it means to live as the identity of appetite. Then, they will not hinder you. Presaid diminished is left breathless and fetal. The suffering is not fake. The experience leaves no questions for the loss of metabolism, though still attached to clinging identities. calling themselves friends, family, pastor, professor, politician, and parents. Those light substances are not a resonant but resonance, and how we sift light when new star is born. Their light is a falling gestation and ours a rising at conception, though up and down a different dynamic than flat line horizon on the belly to standing up here. Without us the cycle would collapse too quickly to reach the core condensational funnel, but the light is just resonant, not hypothetical until the experience. This experience is like passing them under the middle arch chamber. It has to be done, and that's how we do it, but this time was different. It is the end of process for this constellation. The counter-ripple assembly counted by value to numbers doesn't exist in the creation scope, but the processes are similar to the description earlier. The fact of emergence needs to be attended, is generally considered a repetitive function, not unprecedented, but it's never specifically replicated, because that is a closed gate. More of us are bumping our heads to the point, do not interrupt the processions. For as Christians as we start, it's like watching Jesus doing backflips down a mogul hill, and then positioning a snow plow font to begin our own path forward. If they could, they would seek only to replicate the performance and call it not good, but perfect. An explanation is offered. I would imagine Franklin and Tesla, eventually buried in sayings and symbols of ambiguity remembered to this day, might have experienced similar things. A year's long functioning of accomplishment eventually laying or pulled back, and then stopping. Production finished. Now let us consume some things. Ethereal descriptions of pennies and falling stars, beautiful minds behind the curtain, and the question is always, where is it? You tell me. My name, you know it. If it wasn't for you, there would be no reason for this, it must have happened already. Try to enjoy it. I have a job here as an observer. Not an observation for the sake of tasteful critique, an observation of my experience. A resonant hypothetical, tasked with working through differing nodes of enlightenment. There are ways here you and I are not so different. The difference is that I'm not reality, I'm an experience. Language coding can be confusing because we have not defined meanings between us. Once the nodes of enlightenment are experienced and stitched together, a quilt is formed, and those experiences start speaking for themselves. If the fabric is used for more than wool around the absence, like a shell or a cloak, the winds will push up the envelope, four corners are secured.